In the virtual worlds we craft, every surface tells a story. From the rustic allure of aged vases to the gleam of a knight's sword, it's all in the materials and textures. Today, we're not just learning about them, we're mastering them. Welcome to the canvas of the digital realm, where textures are your paint and materials your brush. This is Ranger Realm Studios, your gateway to mastering Unreal Engine 5. Join us by hitting subscribe. Let's create the extraordinary, one pixel at a time. Today, we're diving into the world of materials and textures in Unreal Engine 5. Creating compelling materials and textures can make or break your game's visual appeal. Let's break down the process step by step so you can master this critical skill. In the last video, we imported our first static meshes. If you're following along with this tutorial series, I'd recommend downloading the files that I shared in the description of the video. Once you download the materials and textures folder, we can keep going. Open up your content browser. This is where we'll do a lot of our work today. How you organize your workspace is entirely up to you. I like to create folders for every single thing that I do in order to keep everything nice and organized. For our purposes today, since we'll be creating materials for the static meshes that we imported last time, I'm gonna go to where we saved our static meshes in the engine, right click, create a new folder, and call it materials. We're also going to create another folder and call it textures. If you don't want to create these folders, you don't have to. Again, I just like to keep everything nice and organized. Next, open up the textures folder. Either click on import at the top of the content browser, or you can right click into the content browser, go all the way up to import, go to where you saved the textures. First, let's import the sword texture. Select everything that's inside of the folder and hit open. This will create all the textures for the sword itself. Then if you want to in here, go ahead and create a new folder, call it sword, because we're going to have different textures for the vase. Move here, and let's do it again. Import, go back to textures. Now click on vase and import all of the textures that are associated with the vase. We'll make another normal map for us. Okay, let's create another folder, call it vase, move these textures into that folder. Now that everything is nice and organized, let's go ahead and save all just to make sure we don't lose our work. Then we're going to go back to our assets folder. Then we go into materials, right click, and then create a new material. Let's call it sword underscore map for material. Double click it. This will open up material editor for our first object that we're going to be creating today. Now, materials work best if you feed them textures, especially if they are custom meshes like the ones we added last time. Now with the material editor open, hit Control and spacebar to bring up the content browser. Go back to your textures folder and drag all of the sword textures that we imported into your material editor. This will add all of the images, texture samples into the editor, and then just move it around so we have some space. And let's take a look at each of these. So at the top of the material itself, we have the base color, which is going to be the diffuse texture, or the diff in this case for short. So what we're gonna simply do, take the RGB node pin that's right here, just click on it and drag it over to base color. Now, main material you see changed and added the colors from the texture that we're using. If you want to use a different viewing method, you click on the different shapes down here and change it into a cube, plane, cylinder, and even custom objects, but keep it a sphere for now. Again, now we added a basic color to the material, but we can do many more things to make it feel a lot more realistic. Now let's look at the other textures that we have. We have sword ambient occlusion, which will plug into the ambient occlusion. We have the sword metallic. This will show how metallic certain aspects of the mesh are, because if you look at the image itself, you can see there's something brown here that is not showing up over here, which means this is not a metallic piece on the material itself. Same principle, go up here to RGB, click and drag pin over to metallic. This will already change it to be a little bit more reflective. You can disconnect pins by holding the Alt key and left clicking on it. See how it changed over here? Let's plug it back in. Metallicness changed of the material itself. This is the roughness. This shows just how smooth or how rough the reflections are supposed to be. Once again, we're just going to take the RGB, plug it into roughness. Now we see how shiny the material has actually become and how much light it can reflect. Then let's take the ambient occlusion, plug that into ambient occlusion. Have a few minor changes going on in the material. And lastly, take the normal, which is this really blue looking map. And and down here it's a slightly different color. Go ahead and plug that into normal. You can see texture of the sword itself has changed. The sword doesn't show too much of it as it is a relatively flat object, but normal maps are an amazing tool. A normal map is a 2D image that can give the illusion of making a flat surface appear three-dimensional. But now that all of our textures are plugged in, save, go back to our first map. Let's locate the sword that we placed in our map, click on it, and either change the material down here, or what you can also do is go back to your material folder, find your sword material, and simply drag and drop it onto the sword. And this will automatically apply the sword material for you. If you want to, let's take a quick look. Right click anywhere in the level, hit play from here, and then that is where you're going to start playing. Got the sword on the wall, looking pretty nice. All right, good job. Go ahead and save it. Now let's go back into our content browser, create another material, call it vase_map, open it up, and let's do the same thing. Go into texture, vase, go ahead and drag all of them in. We have our normal map. We have two different color textures. So first, let's go ahead and plug in the normal, so that's done and out of the way. You can already see the sphere has added some depth and detail to it. Now, because we have two different textures, but we can only really use one at a time, select one of the two, doesn't matter which one, right click on it, move down to convert to parameter, and let's call it the base color. Now with this being a parameter, this is a variable that we can change once we create a material instance to something else. That way we can create multiple different materials out of a single one. So let's delete this orange one, drag the RGB into our base color, hit save, go back to our first map. Now this one is named vase 1. Let's go ahead and give it the vase material. This is what it looks like. And this one is vase 2. Before we apply the material, let's go back to our materials folder, right click on vase material, go up, and create material instance. This will then create a material instance of the original material. With this instance, we can then open it up, which will open the instance editor. Then up here, we can check the variable that we wish to change. So base color. Then what we can do is change the texture of the base color. Now we basically have two different materials, but instead of going in and changing everything around, all we can do is change one of the variables. And now we have a completely new material to apply to our vases. And lastly, let's talk about the diamonds. So go ahead, create a new material, call it diamond_mat, open it up. Now this material, we didn't import any textures for it, so we will be creating it entirely from scratch. So the first step is when you have the main material node selected, come over here to the left panel, go to blend mode, and instead of opaque, we're going to go to translucent because diamonds are see-through. So we want to make sure that they're translucent. Then go ahead and scroll down a little bit until you find the translucency setting and lighting mode. Change it from volumetric non-directional to surface translucency volume. This is how we set up the main material. Now press 1 on the keyboard and left click into the editor. This will create a constant, which is a variable or a single value can later be used to manipulate the material if we want to change it to a parameter. Now we're going to keep this at 0 and feed it into the roughness. Go ahead and press 1 again, left click, change the value to 1 and plug it into metallic base color. This will be the base color that we will be using, as well as how shiny we want our object to be. And it doesn't look much like a diamond yet, but we're going to get there very shortly, because next we're going to be creating the refraction itself. So we're going to right click and search for Fresnel. Here we move it over so we have enough space. Then from this pin, we're going to drag and drop. This will open up the search bar again, allowing us to find all of the nodes, and we will type in lerp linear interpolate. The linear interpolate node basically blends two values based on a third value. So we're going to disconnect the A by alt clicking and then drag down into the alpha. All right, then we're going to create another constant. Again, 1 on the keyboard, left click, change the value to 1, plug it into the A, and you can either Control D, which will duplicate the constant, or Control C, Control V, or just again, press 1 on the keyboard and click. I'm going to change this value, however, 2.42, which is the IOR value or the index of refraction value for diamonds. And we're going to plug this into the B section. This number will depend on what kind of material you're trying to create. So if you're trying to create an emerald, for example, you would be using an index value of 1.56. You can find these numbers on Google. So this is supposed to plug in to your refraction. which is currently disabled, which was a recent update in the Unreal Engine, because in Engine version 5.1 it was always enabled. So in order to enable it now, go over here into your search bar in the details panel, type in refraction, and under refraction method, change it to index of refraction, because we are working with the IOR numbers. Cancel it out, and this will enable your refraction. Now, once again, from your lerp or your linear interpolation node, drag over into the refraction, then create another constant, hit 0.5, drag this into your opacity. You can already see now you can kind of see through the material itself. Now, one last step. Because diamonds tend to have very fine details inside of the model itself, what we're going to need to do is change our material so we can actually see the inside of the diamond as well. You do that by simply clicking on your main material node, going back into the details panel, and then check two-sided. This will once again change how your material looks. Now you get a lot more detail and it catches a lot more light as it passes through the object. That is it. That is the basic material or a diamond. Now let's go close to a diamond, find our diamond material, drag and drop it on top. Now, if you want these materials to apply all the objects in your world, go back to your 3D assets, open up the asset itself, and in the top right corner where it says material slots, change the material to the material you want it to be, save, and this should take over all the materials for every object that you placed in the world. Now, going back to the diamond material, I don't like to only have white diamonds. So let's say we want our game to have different diamonds that have different values. So we're going to disconnect the base color, and then we're going to hit 3 on the keyboard and left click. This will create a 3-digit constant for us. It will drag the value into the base color, because this is how we're going to determine our color. Because if we double click on the black, we can open up our little color wheel and choose whichever color we would like for our diamond. Go for a nice blue. But now the material will be stuck like this forever, right? So what we're going to do is right click once again and convert to parameter. Let's call this base color. Now what we can also do is change our IOR value to a parameter as well. IOR value. That way, if we have different gemstones throughout our world, we can now simply change the material instance, change this variable in that instance, and then that will apply for all of the different gemstones that we have. Hit save, back to our content browser, right click on diamond material, create material instance, you name it emerald inst, open it up. Now here we have the IOR value, which we're going to change to the one of an emerald. That is 1.56. For the color, we're going to change the hex value 50C878. Hit OK, save. Now I can apply the emerald instance to the diamond. Save, hit play. Let's take a look. Vase. There are 2 blue diamonds. Gorgeous sword on the wall. The other vase. Then or emerald. If you want to check how expensive your materials actually are when it comes to processing power, go up to Lit, Optimization View Mode, and then Shader Complexity. And this will change everything to kind of green, white, and red. Everything that is green is very good. As we can tell, our diamonds are extremely bad. They take a lot of computing power to really render out the way we want them to be. There's ways to fake some of the things that we did, but we will cover that in a future video. And there you have it. You've just created your first material with a texture and applied it to an object. Now, this is a fundamental way of creating materials. In the future, we will create a series of various materials so you can learn even more detailed ways to create these materials that will add incredible depth to your worlds. Before we go, don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell for more in-depth Unreal Engine 5 tutorials. And let us know in the comments what kind of materials you think you will need for your future game projects. Until next time, keep it unreal.